In the lead up to the budget, it had become clear that the Indian economy was losing its growth momentum. India's GDP has grown at an average of less than 5% annually since 2019 and less than 6% since 2014. Hello and welcome to our channel. Today we are discussing the key highlights of budget 2025 and I will be breaking down the top announcements from this year's budget. Massive income tax cuts, more money in hands of taxpayers. Discontent has been simmering among the middle class about being taxed too much. Many had therefore expected some form of tax relief in the budget. However, the finance minister surprised everyone by announcing massive income tax relief by raising the tax rebate level to an annual income of rupees 12 lakh. This level has been rupees 7 lakh until now. She also tweaked tax slabs in a manner that the highest tax rate in the country, 30%, will come into effect only after one reaches an annual income of rupees 24 lakh per annum or rupees 2 lakh per month. This relief is of course limited to income taxpayers. It will leave them with more money in their pockets. The government hopes that the additional money will be spent and that will kickstart a growth process that will also incentivize companies to finally start investing in new capacities, thus creating new jobs and incomes. Fiscal discipline maintained deficit to reduce despite foregone revenue. When governments overspend or provide tax relief, there is fear that it may force them to borrow more money. When governments borrow more, they either leave less money for private citizens and companies to borrow, which in turn raises interest rates for everyone, or they are forced to print money, and that leads to inflation, which also works like a tax because it reduces the purchasing power of people's money. However, despite the massive tax cut which will cost the government around rupees 1 lakh crore in foregone revenues, the fiscal deficit or the level of money borrowed of the government will be reduced further to 4.4% of the GDP in 2025 to 26, the financial minister said. Capital expenditure growth stalls, signaling shift away from recent budgets. The big story from the budgets in the second term of the government was the focus on increased capital expenditure by the government. Capital expenditure essentially refers to spending towards creating productive assets such as roads and ports and bridges. Not only did the government miss its capital expenditure target for the current financial year by almost rupees 1 lakh crore, the budgeted capex for next year is less than rupees 10,000 crore over the current year. That being said, the capex allocation is still high by historical standards. Focus on employment generation visible in attempt to boost specific sectors. Another big turnaround in focus has been the shift towards employment generation. For a while now, the government has been criticized for ignoring the employment generation aspects of its policy measures. For instance, the production-linked incentive scheme was essentially a subsidy for companies and ventures that were heavy on the use of capital instead of labor. This budget brings the focus back on employment generation, and this shows up in the shape of measures announced for boosting economic activity in sectors such as textiles and leather that traditionally create more jobs for the same level of GDP. Push for regulatory reforms, a late but welcome step. The finance minister announced the creation of a committee that will look into regulatory reforms that are required to make it easier for companies and entrepreneurs to do business in India. While this is a welcome step, it is late. It has come as many as 11 years after the government first came to power.